You didn't lose your closest friends. You just stopped noticing they were gone. You open your phone to text someone about a genuinely ridiculous thing that happened to you today. You scroll down your messages looking for the right person to send it to. But as you scroll past the delivery updates and the dead group chats, you close the app. The funny thing doesn't actually feel funny anymore. You realize right in that moment that you couldn't name the last time you told someone something important the exact same day it happened. Not a week later. Not wrapped in a 10-minute catching up preamble over overpriced coffee. The same day. You have people you'd call friends. You could list their names right now. But if your life fell apart at 2 a.m. tonight, you'd hesitate before dialing any of them. Not because they are bad people. Not because they wouldn't care. Because you genuinely do not know if you're still close enough to ask them to carry that weight. The loneliness epidemic everyone keeps writing articles about isn't actually about being physically alone. It's about being surrounded by people you used to be undeniably close to and feeling absolutely nothing. And your brain made sure you never noticed the transition because noticing would have hurt too much. There is a specific psychological mechanism that made this decay completely invisible to you. And once you hear what it is, you'll realize this process started way earlier than you think. But before we get to why your brain hid this from you, we need to talk about what you were actually doing while it happened. Someone asks you to hang out. You don't say no, you say, "This week's crazy," or "Let me check my schedule." And then you simply never follow up. You aren't being malicious. You just let the silence answer for you, and you've done this so many times it doesn't even register as a choice anymore. Then there's the performative check-in. You send a "thinking of you" text once every 4 months. It feels incredibly generous when you hit send, but you never actually share a single real detail about your life in that message. It is a maintenance ping. It's not a conversation. It's the friendship equivalent of watering a plastic plant. Eventually, someone who used to be your 2 a.m. emergency contact quietly becomes someone you interact with exclusively through Instagram story reactions. A fire emoji where a 3-hour phone call used to be. Neither of you said a word about the shift. You still think of yourself as someone with close friends because you are remembering a version of those relationships from 2021. You're running on cached data. The friendship hasn't been updated in years. Your self-image just hasn't caught up to the reality. And the final nail, plans get canceled, and you feel relief instead of disappointment, not once, repeatedly, and you completely stopped questioning what that means. Every single one of those behaviors feels small, harmless. That's exactly what makes them so effective at dismantling something without you noticing. Hedonic adaptation is your brain's ability to normalize almost any condition over time, whether it's extreme pleasure, acute pain, or in this case, a profound absence. It's usually brought up in happiness research, but it works identically on friendship erosion. Your brain adjusts to each micro loss of closeness so smoothly that no single moment ever registers as a rupture. It's not that you just got used to loneliness. It's that your brain recalibrated what normal feels like hundreds of times without your permission. Imagine sitting in a room where the lights dim by exactly 1% every single day. On no individual day would you look around and say, "It got darker." But after a year, you are sitting in near darkness and you've been reading by feel for months. Psychologist Robert Zayonk identified something called the mere exposure effect, proving that familiarity breeds closeness. But the inverse is just as ruthless. When passive, repeated exposure disappears, when you stop sharing an office, a college dorm, a daily commute, closeness cannot survive on intention alone. The friendships that felt effortless back then weren't effortless because you had magical chemistry. They were effortless because proximity was doing 90% of the structural work. Remove the structure, and intention almost never fills the gap. The soft decline isn't laziness. It's what happens when there's no external structure forcing contact, and your brain has already normalized the distance. This means the closest friendships of your life may have already ended, and the ending didn't feel like anything at all, so your brain hid the loss from you. But that raises a worse question. What were you telling yourself instead? Here's what no one talks about. You didn't get busy. You got comfortable with empty. Most people who have no close friends anymore didn't experience a massive betrayal or a dramatic screaming match. They experienced a slow, mutual withdrawal that both sides cooperated in. Because maintaining closeness without structural support requires a kind of vulnerability that adults are quietly, systematically trained out of. You have to be the one who says, "I miss you," first. You have to be the one who initiates contact with absolutely nothing to report. You have to tolerate the agonizing possibility that the other person has already let go. And your brain calculated that low-grade, constant loneliness was vastly less risky than finding that out. You tell yourself you're too busy for close friendships. The reality, supported by research from psychologist Jeffrey Hall, is that it takes roughly 200 hours of investment to build a close friendship, and you are currently investing 0 hours by choice and calling it a circumstance. You're not too busy. You're too protected. Busyness is simply the most socially acceptable way to abandon people without ever having to be the bad guy. And the reason this feels quietly devastating instead of dramatic is because there was no villain, just two people who each assumed the other one would reach out first, forever. If you're watching this and realizing the last time you initiated plans with a close friend, not responded to them, initiated, was more than 2 months ago, that number is your answer. But what does this actually look like from the inside? Not in a psychological theory, in a regular Tuesday night. Imagine you're on the couch. It's a Thursday. You're scrolling and you see an old friend just posted a photo at a restaurant you both used to go to. They're with other people. Your stomach does something small and involuntary. You open their contact. You almost text them. You type out, "Looks fun," and then you stare at it. You delete it because it feels try hard, it feels desperate. You put the phone face down, grab the remote, and open Netflix instead. 3 weeks later, they text you a meme. You respond with a laughing emoji. You both feel like you're still friends. But here is what actually happened in reality. You felt a real pang of loss. Your brain flagged the vulnerability as a threat. And you chose a laughing emoji over saying, "I miss hanging out with you." And they did the exact same thing from their end. You are both sitting in separate rooms, missing each other, performing closeness through reaction emojis, and calling it a friendship. Neither of you is wrong. Neither of you is cruel. You're both just doing what Hedonic Adaptation trained you to do, except the dimmer room. This is the mechanism, not one dramatic exit, 1,000 micro retreats disguised as normal life. The specificity of that, deleting the text and opening Netflix, probably made you think of someone very specific right now. Someone you should probably send this video to. So if this is the pattern, is there actually anything to do about it that isn't just another empty platitude about reaching out more? The shift is not go text your friends right now. That is a bumper sticker. The shift is this. Closeness is not a status you earn and keep. It is a frequency you either maintain or lose signal on. You've been treating your closest friendships like a saved video game file, something you can just return to whenever you finally have the time and pick up exactly where you left off. But closeness doesn't pause, it decays. And the fact that it decays silently is not a flaw in the friendship. It is a biological feature of how human attachment works outside of forced proximity. You don't need more friends. You need to stop outsourcing the heavy lifting of closeness to circumstances that no longer exist. The shared commute, the college dorm, the group chat that used to be active. You have to accept that adult closeness costs deliberate, slightly uncomfortable effort. Every single time. The friends you miss most aren't gone. They're just exactly as far away as you are from them. And maybe the hardest part isn't that you let it happen. It's that you already know exactly who you're thinking of right now. You didn't ghost your best friends. You just both slowly agreed to pretend that less was enough. It wasn't. You both know it wasn't. The only difference between a lost friendship and a dormant one is whether someone is willing to feel awkward for 30 seconds and send a message that says more than, "Haha, we should hang out soon." So your brain slowly turned all your close friends into acquaintances and then convinced you it was just a scheduling conflict. Classic brain behavior. Absolutely unhinged organ. If this video made you think of someone specific, you already know what to do. Or, you could just like the video instead and avoid vulnerability entirely. Your call. We don't judge. We do judge a little.